to the February RAC meeting. Let's do a call to order. John, if you can do the honors.
Sure. Mike Leibowitz,
Here.
Solomon Chen.
Here.
Kiana Cleveland.
Here.
Hi. Leonard Edwards, we're still looking for. Lucas Haboski said he couldn't make it. Brian Meyer.
Present.
Present. Dina Passman.
Here.
Pat Sheehan.
Was on the phone.
I saw his name.
Here.
I see him.
Yeah, here.
I see him. Cole Stout said he couldn't make it. Brandon Wu is right there. All right. You have a quorum, Mike.
All right. Thank you, John. Thank you, everybody, for joining us tonight. Before we get to the public comment portion, I wanted to welcome the newest member of the RAC, Kiana Cleveland. Which is say welcome. We look forward to working with you on behalf of Metro Riders. John suggested earlier that if you want to introduce yourself, you're more than welcome to, but I'm one of those people where I'm so introverted, I'm like, oh, I hope no one asks me to do that. But if you'd like to introduce yourself, please go ahead. If you want to just kill us with silence, I'm happy with that too.
Sure. I'd just like to say that I'm very, very glad to join everyone, and I'm looking forward to working with everyone and learning from everyone. And I hope we have great success with the council. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so on that note, let's move on down our agenda to public comment. I don't see anybody, but I'll confirm with John. Do we have anybody from the public?
We have one non-RAC member in the audience. I don't know if she wanted to make any comments. If not, then we can just move on.
Okay, ma'am, if you want us to make a comment, now's your chance, and we're happy to hear from you. Hearing nothing. Okay. Thank you for attending. And this is the first time, I think, in the last several months where we haven't had public comment. So good for us, or in the past anyway. So let's move on down to the one agenda item we have. Normally we have several agendas or several items on the agenda. Today we have one because this is kind of our major focus, the major area we're working on. Before we really get into it and get in with our speaker, Ms. Sullivan, I just wanted to give a few relevant comments and updates that are relevant to this before we get to the presentation or get to speaking with Regina. So a few weeks ago, the RAC submitted more than 20 letters to elected officials in DC, Maryland, and Virginia. And during the last board meeting, board members expressed their appreciation for the RAC and told us that our voice is being heard. They wanted us to make it very clear that we were being heard. And the board also stated that it's important for elected officials to hear about the budget issue from the rider perspective, which we effectively did, I believe. So I just wanted to thank everybody on the RAC for your work on what I think is a successful initiative. And also special thanks to John for putting in a lot of work to make this happen. I see Regina on there, so I'll say thank you to you as well. And kind of related to that, with respect to our recent recommendation regarding fare increases that we voted on during our last meeting, board members at the last board meeting remarked that our reasoning was nuanced and compelling. And I'm optimistic that our influence, coupled with other factors that we'll get into, will help keep fares from jumping to like 25%, as the Finance Committee had at one point looked at. But since we submitted our letters to elected officials, there has been some, at least on the media reports and statements from WMATA, encouraging developments in all three jurisdictions. Ms. Regina Sullivan is the Director of Metro's Government Relations, and she is here to give us an update. After we have a chance to speak with her, the RAC can consider our next steps in public outreach and look into things that might be productive based on, kind of our conversation with Regina. My personal view, this again is just me, is that until the votes are cast, riders are not out of the woods. But in any way. On that note, Ms. Sullivan, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you, Mike. It's Regina, please. First, I want to thank you all for the opportunity to be here this evening. I told John that I was really flattered that you all wanted to hear from the government relations and really appreciate being here. And I also want you to know how much I've been at Metro 13 years. And I want you to know how much I appreciate every day the work that you do, the volunteer work that you do. That's so important to this organization and the voice of the riders, in the voice of the riders. So thank you so much for that. I have done a lot of advocacy work in my life, and I know what an effect that can, significant effect it will have in this kind of challenging fiscal situation we have. I just want to take just a minute to talk to you a little bit about the Government Relations Office, because I'm had the honor, as I said, for 13 years to lead it. And you should also know that John Pasek is an honorary member of our office, having such great political experience. So I call on John frequently for advice and support. So you're very fortunate to have him as your liaison. The Government Relations Office is a small but terrific team, in my opinion. I have Ann Chisholm, who handles District of Columbia relations, and Charlie Scott, who handles Maryland, and is also the person who's the liaison to the Joint Coordinating Committee, the JCC. Greg Potts, who is currently living in Richmond, Virginia, who handles Virginia issues, and then Eric Bustos, who joined us about a year ago, who is the Federal Relations Officer. And we also have a terrific admin, Terry DeBose Wilson, who's been with the agency for 35 years and can find anything in the building, anything at Metro. So really a great team. And I'd love the opportunity for you all to meet them. I'm going to, if John will have us again, or Mike, if he'll have us again, I'd love to have some of them join too. But I just wanted to give you a little context for the office that provides government relations. We educate elected officials and liaison with all, state, local, federal, the White House, the folks in all the departments, FTA, and so it's really a big portfolio with a terrific group. So just wanted to mention that. I want to also, and I obviously at the board meetings and had the opportunity to listen to our board members. So as Mike said, articulate the work that you've done to reach out to the key elected officials in the region. I've heard about it too. So I want you to know that it is definitely having a significant effect and helping us a great deal. We did get a lot of, let me just dive into this. And what I was going to do is just do a brief update and then love to have questions, conversation, because, I'd love to hear from you too. And anything I don't know tonight, I get answers, I will get back to John expeditiously. So I make sure I cover all the subjects that we're going to discuss. Just let me give you an update. So what I was going to do is the update on the 3 jurisdictions. And then just briefly, I know our focus has been there, but I don't want to neglect our congressional efforts too, because that's going to be important. It's important now. It'll be increasingly as important as we move towards a reauthorization of the Surface Transportation Bill. It's 2 years away. That's not a long time in legislative. I worked on Capitol Hill for a long time. That's not a long time. So we can start thinking about that after we get through the 25 budget. But so we did receive, as Mike alluded to, some good news last week. I will tell you in Virginia, thanks to the hard work of Delegate Mark Sickles, who's Vice Chair of the Appropriations Committee, and Senator Dave Marsden, the budget amendments in Virginia, which are necessary to provide the additional subsidy to close the fiscal gap, are moving through the process. Next week is the big budget week in Richmond, because a week from Sunday, they have all of the budget amendments are revealed. So there is $65 million for FY25. And then the 26 number we're working on. And the reason you're probably like, why is the 2 years? Virginia has a biennial 2-year budget, which is great. Frankly, this is my comment, personal comment. I wish we had a 2-year budget. A little difficult to do, but anyway. But so we are that legislation, those budget amendments are moving through the process. We have, and you all know this because I know you know them, those of you who are Virginians and just in the region, we have a terrific delegation down in Richmond. We're very fortunate to have a lot of terrific leaders. We work very closely with Rip Sullivan, with Senator Boysko, with the majority leader of the Senate is Scott Serval, and we're fortunate that he's in that leadership position to help us with this effort. He's also helping with the bill. So that's important. Obviously, the money is very important. And as I know you all know, one of the fun things you get to do when you're a member of the RAC is learn about things like the 3% cap. And for most people, 99% of the people in this region, it's like, what is that? That was the for those of you who may be new and or not as familiar with it, when we were fortunate to get the historic dedicated funding in 2018, the Virginia and Maryland legislatures capped the subsidy, that how much it could be increased by 3%. And so in order for us to receive the extra money that we need to close the gap, that legislation has to be temporarily suspended. So that is also moving through the legislature down in Richmond. We have met with Governor Youngkin and Secretary Miller and their team, and they've been very open to listen and hear from us. And Governor Youngkin lives here, not when he's not in Richmond, but in Great Falls. So he, knows the area well. His children grew up here. So he certainly understands the value of the system. So that's what's going on real quick in Virginia. In Maryland, we have tremendous support from obviously Governor Westmore, who included $150 million in his budget when it came out, and obviously with the strong support of Secretary Paul Wiedefeld. So nothing like having your former leader there as Secretary of Transportation to help with that. There's also legislation sponsored by Delegate Corman, Delegate Jazz Lewis from Prince George's County, Senator Feldman from Montgomery County, and Senator Augustine, some of you who might know who was on our board and is now in the legislature and a very significant leader there. They're sponsoring changing the 3% cap and making sure that the money stays in the budget. That's not necessarily at risk there, but they've been tremendously supportive. Let me just say for a moment about Maryland. Maryland, like all of our jurisdictions, are supportive, but they are particularly supportive. But you can never assume, because there's so many needs on the transportation side, as I know you all know. And in Maryland, they have a commission. The governor has set up a commission to look at what revenues and what sources are we going to come up with. There's a report, an interim report, then the final report in the next year and a half. Charlie Scott, who works with me in government relations, is the WMATA appointee to that commission. Charlie's a former MDOT employee, budget expert, so he was the person that John Manager chose to put on there. But they're looking at how are they going to come up with the revenues. So Baltimore has a lot of needs. Every county has bus needs. So we don't ever take for granted that extra $150 million the governor and the legislature is supporting there. So that's a little bit about Maryland. Happy to answer more questions about that. Last week, I'm sure you all saw, there was a letter from Mayor Bowser, Chairman Mendelson, and Chairman Allen indicating they would put up to $200 million in additional funding for WMATA. I have to say, I have seen, and I know you probably, because you all are such, are so familiar with WMATA, the District of Columbia is in a very, very difficult fiscal situation right now. If you looked at the CFO of Glenn Lee's most recent projections, it's very difficult. And I know the city is going to go some very difficult times as a result of the commercial real estate. I mean, I think DC, I look at it nationally. I'm sure some of you do. I happen to be an economist by education, love that stuff. And so I look at that a lot too. And it's unfortunate that the district is really getting hit like our friends in San Francisco. We really, really appreciate the mayor and the Chairman Mendelson and Chairman Allen's leadership in being able to provide that funding. It's going to be difficult for them, and the commitment's we really, really appreciate it. I think what I'm going to do, if it's okay with you all, is stop there, and maybe we could talk about the 3 jurisdictions. And if you want, I'm delighted to talk about the Hill and what's going on with the appropriations bills, because it directly affects our capital funding, and I know you all are steeped in that too. And every capital dollar, particularly given where we are, is going to be increasingly important. So I'm happy, Mike, I think I've filibustered long enough. So happy to answer questions, love to have a conversation.
Great, thank you so much. That was a great, somehow you managed in just a short amount of time, just go through the whole thing in all 3 jurisdictions with references to federal. So what I'll do is I'll ask the RAC. I see Brian has his hands up. Any members of the RAC wants to speak, we'll go down the list. Just use the hand thing in Teams, and then we'll call on you in order as I see it, I guess. And then we'll just go from there. So Brian.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Mike. And thank you so much, Regina, for coming and speaking with us. It's great catching up, and certainly a lot more promising and exciting news than last month, or certainly the month before. I have a feeling that I think the meetings, I think finance and capital's meeting tomorrow.
Right.
I think that is going to be on the slightly better side in terms of updates and FY25 and FY26. Entirely grateful that, I'm from Virginia, that there's a willingness to step up and help meet the kind of budget deficit that we were facing. And I don't want to put you in a precarious position here, but is the question of dedicated funding, is that going to be a conversation that's just going to be ongoing for the next couple of years to figure out what that would look like or in how to organize that?
Brian, great question. Thank you so much. No, happy to answer that question. Well, we're focused right now, obviously, on 25 and 26. That time, that assurance, and I'm with Mike on that. When the signatures, all three signatures are on the budget, then I'll say we're in good shape. But I'm cautiously optimistic. And you can tell that we're going to get there. But that will give us time to work with all of our stakeholders in the region, elected, you all, very importantly, and others, to put together, look at what kind of revenue sources and what kind of potential new dedicated funding is needed and what the options are. There's a study, and I apologize, I should have mentioned this to Senator Adam Evan, who some of you probably know, Brian, from Alexandria, who is just a terrific supporter, has a study on behalf of the Northern Virginia Transportation Commission, which the senator is a member of, appointee of, to look at, and I can send you all this legislation too if you want it. I'm happy to send you that if you all like to read the bills, which will look at what kind of options are there for new revenue sources. They're looking clearly in Virginia, but nonetheless, the revenue sources don't vary that much state to state. They do. There are some obviously nuanced differences. And what's viable in Northern Virginia. They're going to look at cost containment in addition, because obviously that's something we need to continually work at making sure we're doing from a management perspective, and welcome their recommendations there. So that the reason I'm saying is that gives that there's the Maryland Train Commission that's I've talked about. There's that study. Obviously, the CFO in the district has done a lot of work with the Council of Governments on the study. So those will all help build a body of options for the board and for electeds to consider as we move through it. So lots more work to come, Brian, for sure. So yes, it's just, having the assurance of the funding for 25 had to be the first, obviously, critical step that we did here so that we could have the breathing room to have those conversations and get moving on it.
And I think that breathing room is important because it gives us the time to figure out a dedicated funding regime and do it right in terms of implementation and getting adequate buy-in. I do have a follow-up question, not about that, but I do want to delve a little deeper into just a federal question.
Sure.
I think it was Hank Johnson from Georgia that proposed a big federal infusion in operating budget for public transit projects.
Yes.
Now, aside from whether or not that's going to pass or not, politics is politics. But is WMATA investing time and energy to emphasize operating support at the federal level?
Great question. So I will tell you first that Congressman Johnson is absolutely one of the biggest advocates for transit, as you know, in the Congress. And we're so grateful for his leadership on that legislation, which I think candidly will probably be part of a bigger discussion, but it's great to have that bill introduced. We have frequent conversations with our delegation about obviously the capital. And I'll just real quickly say right now, I'll tell you about that later, but about the capital funding, but we always talk to them about operating funding too. And there used to be something called, and I'm old enough to remember this, rail modernization, and it was provide operating funding to big transit agencies like us. The trade-off when they eliminated that was we got more capital dollars in the surface bill. And so that was back in the late 90s. Yeah. So I had to think about which bill it was. But anyway, so that was the trade-off. So that's why they don't do operating assistance. Smaller transit agencies still get a nominal operating assistance. Sorry for the history lesson. But it gives it a little context. So we do talk to them all the time about it. I'll be candid, it's a difficult discussion right now. But it's definitely something they're interested in ongoing. We have champions like Jerry Conley, who has been just beating the drum since as long as I've been here, and John worked for him before that, so he knows too, about how important this system is to the nation's capital. So we have that. I will tell you that our Senate delegation sent a letter to the president and to Shalonda Young, who runs the Office of Management and Budget, asking that the president consider in his budget that's going to come out March 8th, putting in $30 million. I know it sounds like a small amount, but every dollar matters, for our police and national security. We have a unique role, as you all know. And they thought that that would be something the president could think through, and they've obviously are advocating for it. And so we'll see how that comes out. I don't have a confirmation of that one way or another, but to start, even Brian, to your point, to start that discussion about the unique nature of this system, that as opposed to other transit agencies, with all due respect to our colleagues, to serve the federal government and the nation because of where we are and what we do. And our police force, they pointed out that when they found the pipe bomb up by the DNC and the RNC, it was one of our dog teams that found that for the Capitol Police in the letter that they transmitted to the president. So happy to send you that too, if you'd like to see that.
I thank you so much for that update. And I think I think what you just said highlights the importance of that, like even from just a strategic perspective, those like sub cases of how federal operating support can help supplement. It's not just like handing over a check to WMATA, but it's very targeted and focused areas that impact the entire region. Okay, yeah, I was just curious about that, and I love hearing those updates. So thank you so much, Regina, and I'm done.
Thank you, Brian. Thank you for all you do. I appreciate it. We appreciate it.
Thanks, Brian. And I can tell you from national security workers in the region at the height of the pandemic, I think pretty much everybody on the trains at one point was probably going to a SCIF or something like that when everybody else was working from home. So I remember those days. But
I met with OMB every other week, and I still do, to update them on it when we were getting rid of service, when we were adding service, and always had the Pentagon, and obviously they were the ones on the call saying, "Oh, we're all here." So thank you for that.
Brandon.
Hi, Brandon.
Good evening. Thank you so much again, Regina, for taking the time. My questions will be pretty brief. Just one off the top of my head, which is, I'm guessing, I know that the initial deficit number we were looking at trying to close was 750 million. And obviously, the amount from the 3 jurisdictions equals roughly 480. Do we know if like the numbers that have been sent out from the 3 jurisdictions are pretty much like ceilings? Like, is there any flexibility above, for instance, the 130 million from Virginia's end? Obviously, I know DC and Maryland have some of their own budgetary issues right now, but curious to hear your thoughts on that.
Well, so Brandon, I'm going to tell you, as long as the budget process is alive, there's always an opportunity to add to it, from my perspective, and it's something you never stop asking for. So, they've done an amazing job coming up with the funding they do, but this process has got to move through the 3 legislative bodies and over to the executive for signature. So we will continue to see how that evolves, and give you an update if we get any on that.
Perfect. And then the other question was about 2 points, I think, from Mayor Bowser, Chairman Mendelson, and Chairman Allen's letter. I think it was like point number 4 about how the maintenance fund shouldn't be used as a rainy day fund, and then the freezing of new capital projects. So I think evidently, like, it, at least to me, reads as if WMATA is kind of going to get funding conditional on following these objectives through. So do we know, like, right now at least, like what capital project, like for sure, like what will be delayed, for instance, or what potential maintenance might have to be pushed down the line because of what DC is kind of asking for here?
Sure. And thanks, Brandon. We had a very robust presentation about the situation with our capital budget, and happy to send you that. And we'll have another one tomorrow, a capital update too. I mean, we are in a situation first on the capital program where they're wanting to freeze whatever we're going to have a smaller capital budget in 25 because we don't have as much money. Just be straightforward about it. So we've had to not necessarily cancel anything yet, but defer more than anything else projects, but important projects that we want to keep moving. And when we have more clarity around that, obviously with capital, we can put them back in the process. But in the meantime, they really are in that kind of a state. There's just no 2 ways about it. So we will, continue on the preventative maintenance. So Preventative maintenance is a great tool that you can use at times to take care of preventative maintenance needs, and some of which do fall into the operating side. But using preventative maintenance capital dollars for operating functions is a very bad practice. When I came to Metro, I was delighted that there was, having done work for DART in Los Angeles in the past, I was delighted to see that Metro had such a small number, not to disparage my former clients, but had such a small number, because I think it's not me, but it's a difficult practice. It's a bad practice, especially if you have capital needs like we do. The system was neglected for a long time. This is one of the things that happened, was those kind of dollars were used for things they shouldn't. We're in a situation where we have no option to do it. And you all have heard Randy, how he feels about this. So we're gonna have to do it. The number we're gonna have, if you look at the revised general manager's budget, and I know you all saw that this week, I should have mentioned that right up front, is smaller if it works out the way it's outlined in that proposal, and that's just a proposal. We have to go through the public comment process. I don't need to tell you all that. So if it does, it'll be a smaller amount than we used last year. So that's a positive, because then every time we use the preventative maintenance, we push that ability to have dedicated funding, because we have to move that funding. That all narrows down the time when we're going to run out of dedicated funding, because it's all going to go to pay the debt service. So sorry for the long answer. I hope that's helpful. So it's not something we want to do. And we understand the district's concern. The mayor has expressed that concern. She's been very public about it. So is the chairman. So, I mean, I think I'm a believer that conditioning funding is not a good practice, but we understand the concerns of the jurisdictions. We've heard that from Maryland, and we've heard it from Virginia too. So hope that's helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Brandon. That's definitely a concern I think riders have, for the maintenance funding, and kind of transferring things around to make the budget. It's kind of an awkward, I think, position, even from the RAC as kind of advocates for riders, where you don't want to be like, hey, we need full funding, but at the same, it's kind of like that balancing act. So it is,
right. It's
but
exactly right.
So it is kind of I can appreciate the position you are in, and staff and WMATA are in.
Our budget development meetings were difficult meetings this year. I'm not going to, and they were last year. They were very difficult this year.
Yeah, so obviously from a rider standpoint, yeah, because I think the main thing is, based on our outreach over the past year, and even going back to last April of 2023, is that I think riders are saying that we don't want to go back to the bad old days. And I know Randy Clark has done a phenomenal job. Every time we have the board meetings, like, hey, riders are saying how better things have been over the last year or two than they were in the past. Riders do not want to go back to like the unpredictability of things just falling apart, the fires, the breakdowns, all of the things that kind of like,
yeah,
what I'm talking about.
If I could say, Mike, if you don't mind for just a moment, because I was here obviously during when we were the development of the capital program we have now, the dedicated funding and Safe Track. And I hope we are never in a position to do what happened to our riders during Safe Track, but it was so necessary. And now you see the results of it. And you all know that better than anybody. But I say that to people all the time. It's like the system is in so much better shape now, but the people who paid the price to a large extent were our riders, who had to tolerate all those shutdowns. And we still have this work we're doing, trying to minimize that more, to be honest with you, because I'm one of the people that jumps up and down about it. Anyway, not to not do the work, but to think about, and Sarah Meyer, who you all I know have met with, who's just great, is a huge advocate on that front too.
Sure. Before I get to, I guess, the one question I have, Pat has his hand up, so I will let him.
Mike, you can go first. Go ahead. No, I'll follow you.
Okay, thanks, Pat. So I do have just a question, kind of in line with what I was saying before. Is will it be productive, or would it perhaps even harmful? I'll just get your educated judgment. If the RAC sends, say, follow-up letters to elected officials, I guess particularly in Virginia, noting that riders are encouraged by the stated direction in Metro funding, but we want to reiterate the rider perspective as elected officials kind of head toward the finish line. So I know I had drafted up something I need to be tweaked now, but I'm just wondering if that would be helpful, or if you think that at this point, just kind of let it ride. That's a horrible pun I didn't even intend to do. Or like, I guess, because I think my view is, want to keep the foot on the gas in a tactful pragmatic way that just says like, hey, we're still here. We like what we're seeing, but don't forget about us as writers and just focus again on the writer perspective and not get into the budgetary weeds that you're all in.
Yeah, I would encourage you to do it. And if I could just add one thing, the first thing I did when I learned about this, and I obviously deal directly with the elected officials, was to call and say thank you. So I think from you all too, that would be, obviously you articulated it so well, Mike, but to say right up front, thank you, because it's a lot of work and a lot of lift for everybody who's helping do this. And I think they would definitely welcome to hear from you all again. So and that if I can help in any way with that, please let me know.
Okay, then before we get to Pat, then I will say, we'll have a conversation amongst the RAC after
Yes, sir.
your presentation, see what the RAC, where
Yep,
we want to go.
great.
But I'm going to propose to the RAC that we do the follow up with the thank you, kind of in line with what we had just discussed, and then see if we can bother John yet again to help disseminate the letters to the appropriate people wherever we think it'll be best. On that, there is one other question that I had forgotten. When we first started our kind of drafting the templates for our letters that ultimately got sent to all over the jurisdictions, we originally had a federal one. I think it might have been addressed, the draft to Transportation Secretary Buttigieg, CC to the congressional delegation. It was written a little bit differently. That was just focused on, hey, federal, kind of what you're saying, federal funds every bit. Don't forget about the writer perspective. Again, it's all about the writer perspective because that's our lane, and we fully intend on staying in our lane. And is that something that should wait, or is that another something where we can consider potentially being productive, or is that for like maybe a different phase of all of this?
Yeah, I think maybe the secretary might be in a different, I'm happy to give, when we get done with this, update on where we are with the federal money, and then we could, but it's really more focused on what's going on in the Hill. And the secretary, as you know, is a tremendous supporter. He's been great that way. So I think there will definitely be an opportunity to keep for you all. And he feels very strongly about the rider. I mean, he demonstrates that all over the country when he's, visiting systems and it's consistently in his talking points, and not just that, in the people he's with when he does those. So I think there will be an opportunity to do that with him. I don't think it's right now, though, to be candid, Mike.
Okay, but congressional delegation might be a different
Yes.
story. Okay,
Yeah.
Great. Thank you very much. Patrick.
Sure.
Great. Thank you, Regina. Excellent. A lot of people have asked the questions I was going to ask, so I've gotten those answers, and I appreciate it. I represent Accessibility Advisory Committee, disabled riders with my committee, and also with respect to the RAC. And we have a particular situation, along with everybody else, but with respect to Metro Access, we have a group of folks, disabled folks, who don't have any other options other than using paratransit to get to their appointments, to get to dialysis, to get to their medical appointments, work, and all that sort of thing. With the original budget, it was maybe 9,000 out of 36,000 people cut, 25%. I think that number may be lower now, but that's a particular population that doesn't have any alternative other than do without. So we're really pushing that perhaps we can keep the same service area. If we can fully fund Metro Access so they don't take cuts, that would be great. But it's a constituent that doesn't have the ability to jump in their car or use, let's say, the fixed route service to do what they need to do. So I'm hoping that safety net can be kept in place. And I appreciate, and Michael, you certainly have my support on where you're going to go forward with this other request going forward, because we get together and usually say the same things. With respect to the other area in Virginia that is kind of moving forward, the ball teams and coming to Virginia, Potomac Yards, what they're doing there. How does that work in with what we're trying to do to reduce this $750 million deficit?
Well, thank you, Pat, and
Sure.
Thank you for all you do. I look forward to your reports at the board meetings because I learned an awful lot from you every time you speak. So thank you.
Good. Thank you.
So we have not been engaged yet in the Potomac, not that we won't be soon, but in the Potomac Yard discussion of the, it's not really our role. I mean, obviously, if it turns out that that's where the deal ends up, that, we would obviously have interaction. We have met with the governor, but we've been focused on getting our funding. We don't want to, that's been our focus. As the monumental sports thing moves one way or another, we'll be there. If it ends up at Potomac Yard, we would obviously have to work with the Commonwealth and with Alexandria on how to adjust there. There would be adjustments. So that's a longer term thing. And we're really focused on getting the funding, taking care of FY25. And if I could say, Pat, too, another thing, the revised budget that Randy put out this week, the only the fare increase is recommendation is 12.5%. And the service cuts, the targeted service cuts are on rail, not bus, not metro access. So that if his recommendation is taken and it closes the gap with the funding that's been identified, so all that has to work together, but that's where we would be with that. But we're watching what goes on with Potomac Yard and see what happens.
Good. Okay. And we will look at that meeting tomorrow and see where things stand. That's good.
Yep. And we'll do, the presentation, Tunde and Tom are going to do the presentation on the revised budget tomorrow. So you all get a full dose of that.
Good. Thank you so much.
Thanks. Sure.
Thanks, Pat. I always learn stuff too I always enjoy listening to Pat and Denise and everybody else at the board meetings when
Denise
they give their presentation. I have to follow them, so it's bad for
I know. I don't envy you that.
Yes. So I think that's all of the questions from me and from the RAC. If there's anything else, I know you wanted to talk about potentially federal, but
can I
it's
just mention real quick? I know you'll have a lot on your agenda. I can mention one thing. So I think some of you are familiar with probably back, you're going to be like, oh my gosh, back in 2008, then former Congressman Tom Davis from Fairfax County, Virginia, and Senator Ben Cardin from Maryland led an effort to get Metro $150 million in dedicated funding from the federal government every year. It's matched by the jurisdictions 50-50-50. So it's $300 million out of our budget, out of our capital budget every year. It was reauthorized in the last authorization bill for 8 years, $300 million. It has to be appropriated on an annual basis. And so we work very closely with our congressional delegation to make sure that money's in there. We are caught up in the appropriation situation on the Hill. And but if you see one of our members from the delegation, you should just tell them how much we appreciate their going to bat for us. We had to have a vote on the floor because there was an amendment to take it out. And so I never want to neglect to say how important that funding is. And so I just thank you for letting me mention it. It's really important to us.
Great. Thank you so much, Regina. This has been super helpful on so many levels, and I can't thank you enough on behalf of the RAC. We just really thank you for taking the time to come, and also for your assistance, as we were kind of, drafting our letters in the past and potentially in the next, few days. I think the RAC is one of those, it's interesting in that I was thinking about this potential where we're kind of like, we're kind of independent, so we come up with things, and sometimes, we have to kind of, I'll be pragmatic and professional, but sometimes we have to like tell the board, hey, we don't think this is a good idea or something like that. But this is one of the areas where I think we're all on the same page, and I think it's refreshing. I think for the staff, the management, the board, I think everybody is doing a phenomenal job of kind of navigating this. And I think I joined the RAC out of a sense of frustration several years ago, or I applied for it when things were not so great. And so this is we still have our recommendations and find flaws and things, but this has been a good experience as far as just at least seeing how everybody can kind of pull in the same direction. I think it's been interesting and good.
Thank you again for having me. I really appreciate the opportunity, and I look forward to working with you all as keep going through this and get to our longer term goals. So thank you so much.
Great. Thank you.
All right. Take care. Have a good evening.
Yep. You too. Okay. So what I recommend is that we go through our agenda and then we can revisit kind of actually, let's do it now because it's fresh in our minds. here's what I think. Let's have a discussion about, what we just learned and what we talked about, and then we can move on with our agenda. So based on what Regina said, and kind of like where the conversation went and where the area is, what I propose is that the RAC, and I want to see if the RAC agrees with this. I propose that we do draft brief follow-up letters to the last ones that we had sent, and kind of follows along the lines of what Regina mentioned and what I kind of had mentioned, where I like the idea of saying thank you for, everything, and then say we are encouraged by the stated direction, and then reiterate the writer perspective, and then also a similar letter, which we kind of agreed on last time to the congressional delegation. So I propose that we move forward with that. And I think we're not going to say anything new other than what we just said that we didn't say before. But I think it's good to keep that, because I think the RAC has taken the lead. I know AAC members have individually sent a lot of letters, but as far as like organizationally, I think the RAC has definitely taken the lead on representing the writer perspective in a kind of a coordinated, concise way. I think we should keep our feet on the gas in a pragmatic way that's measured. So what I suggest is we go ahead and write those letters, work with John, if he's willing to deal with us again, to to get them, formatted, to the right people and disseminated in a relatively quick time frame. So does anybody have any thoughts, comments on that? And then perhaps we can put it up for a vote. I'm not sure if we needed to, but I think it's just in fairness, we can put it up for a vote to see if we want to keep it going, and then we can move from there. So does anybody have any comments on that or thoughts? Including John, I guess, if you have anything. Pat.
Yeah, Mike, the AAC certainly will sign on to that. Letters going out. Appreciate the letters that were sent out, that you did mention the disability community. And that was great. So we appreciate being mentioned along with riders in general, as a lot of our members, of course, are transit dependent and don't have the other options. So AAC will say, hey, we'll go along with it. We're happy to assist.
Thank you, Pat. And again, all the things that, I definitely personally listen to everything that you and members of the AAC say. So I always have that in my mind when, we work on our kind of RAC part of it too.
Yep.
I mean, it's all the same group of people. So
same. Yep. Great.
Thank you, Pat. John.
Sure.
Sorry. One other thing that I guess I'd like to maybe raise and see what people would think about putting in the letter is that excuse me, the general manager's revised budget still calls for a fare increase, 12.5%. I think in most cases, as opposed to the 25% that Metro was looking at earlier. And if you all think it would be advantageous to put in there, as riders, we're willing to sort of, I guess, partner in this, in addition to the being grateful that the various state governments have stepped up. I don't want to, I guess the reason I'm mentioning this is I don't want to make it sound like, or I don't want anybody to think that I want the RAC to be on record as like, yeah, we absolutely should all pay more. But in the context of, riders being part of the solution, I just kind of wanted to get y'all's reaction to that.
So Pat, or John, John, I would say, I was looking at Pat when I said it. So I think what you just said kind of goes into what we voted on regarding, we discussed last month regarding fare increases, and what I think went into our report to the board last month, and I think still applies here, is we mentioned, because I like to go back to our annual reports whenever we can, because that's kind of like kind of information and outreach that the RAC has, kind of, got on its own and articulated it to the board and put it in writing as an official document. And on that note, I think we had mentioned that, last April 2023, we asked, writers, what are the top 3 concerns, and a lot of by 60% of the people that contributed to the report said that longevity of the transit system and consistency of operations were the top concerns above everything else, including things like fare evasion and smoking on the trains and things like that. What I got from that is that, because riders didn't talk about the fares or the prices and like that. So it sounds to me, based on the outreach that the RAC has conducted, that riders are generally willing to pay a reasonable little bit amount more to have safe and reliable service. And I think that kind of goes along with what you're saying. Let me know if I'm mischaracterizing your thoughts.
No, that's fine, but I wanted to sort of presence it before it shows up in black and white on a piece of paper.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. No, that's perfect. Brian, I think you had your hand up. Then it went down.
Oh, no, I was just gonna kind of echo what you're saying, Mike. I mean, I think it would be a nice kind of touch point that everyone is part of this solution and everyone is making sacrifices. But my apologies, I wasn't here last month, but I think going back to what you said, Mike, anecdotally, but also the studies support that especially Metro rail riders can definitely soak up a higher fare. Not that it's a great thing, but they're better positioned to do that. I forget what study it was that WMATA had. It was from a couple of years ago. John, I don't know if that's something I forget, but yeah, sorry.
I can't recall the exact study, but I do know, like, every time this comes up, and it's not just with Metro, but service frequency and quality are the drivers of getting people to use or what people want out of their transit, more so than how much they pay. So
that was a much more eloquent way of putting it, John. Thank you.
Sure.
Pat.
And I think, Brian, going along with what you said, and Michael, I think this is correct. Wasn't there a comparison with what we pay versus what other comparable systems pay that are our size? And, so we're not really, if you raise rates, we're just really coming even with those other systems because we've had a break over the last few years.
Yes,
I think that was
that's
part of
exactly
what you said. Yeah.
It is. And I think I know I articulated it more, and it was in our report to the board last month. So definitely would be stealing some language and tailoring it to the audience.
Right.
But so here's what I propose is that, I move that the RAC continues our outreach to educate elected officials on the rider perspective, along the lines of what we discussed, meaning thank you, a thank you, and we're encouraged by the stated direction, and reiterate the rider perspective. And we can talk about things that riders generally, based on certain facts, are generally willing to pay a little more to get reliable and safe transit moving forward. So I move that we do that? Do we have a second, or do I have a second?
I second.
Thank you, Brandon.
Trying to come off mute. Yeah.
All in favor, say aye.
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 Anyone opposed? Okay, so we as a RAC agree. So what we'll do is I'll draft I'm not going to make anything new that we haven't done before or agreed on before. I'll make a draft. I'll send it around, send it to John for CHOP, but I think we should move pretty quickly to because before people start doing weird things, just at least to get it out there that says thank you, if nothing else. I think it was a success, our first round. So the second round, I think we want to maintain our success and keep it going. So thank you, everybody. I think this has been a really meaningful initiative from the RAC. So we will let's do that. So also congressional delegation one we can look at as well, although it's not as much of a priority with kind of like Virginia as the other one, but we'll get there as well. So let's move on to our agenda. So next on the agenda is outreach member report out. And Kiana, I know, oh, John, go ahead.
If I could, and if this is the time, sort of there were a couple sub bullets on the budget discussion.
Oh, okay.
And one of them was budget outreach. So I want to let everybody know that we have set dates for hearings on the budget. Sorry, I'm trying to pull it up here. Can you all see my screen? And I'll circulate this. But we're going to have 4 hearings, 3 of which will be in person the last week of February, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. And then we're going to have 1 hearing that is just online only. So I will circulate this. The public comment period is going to open on this Saturday, the 10th, and will be open for about 4 weeks through Tuesday, March 5th. And I wanted, I guess, to see if there was interest on the part of RAC members to either, I guess, sort of provide coverage to the hearings. There will also, they'll be broadcast and archived on YouTube. But if there is interest in sort of making sure that there's a RAC member at all the in-person hearings, and then layering on top of that, if there's interest in not just attending, but sort of being a more prominent attendee, like I know that in years past, we've had a table out in the open house area that you can use to chat with people who have come to the meeting, or we can get you all a name tag or a button that basically says, "Hi, I'm on the RAC." So if there's interest in doing that, I guess we have about 2.5 weeks just to pull together the logistics. So I wanted to, again, put that out there.
Great. Thanks, John. I see 2 hands up, Jose and then Brian.
Thanks, Mike. Yeah, so if you are planning to attend, please let us know with enough time so I can have name badges. I could just create one for everyone on the RAC, and if you come, they'll be there. And then we'll make sure that you have a table, and we can put a 10 card, RAC, Writers Advisory Council, just so that they know who you are. So if you can just let us know with time, we can definitely create those for you.
Thanks, Jose. I know I'll definitely interested in attending the Arlington one. I just need to check my schedule and see if I will be in town
Okay.
those days. But thank you very much. Brian.
Not a problem.
Yeah, I went to one last year, the one that was in Falls Church, and they're fantastic. And I highly encourage you all to go to them. You get to meet a lot of different members from the community, various staff that are intimately involved in the budget and explaining what's happening on the operating and capital side. So I highly encourage you to do that. We even found a future Randy Clark in the audience. A gentleman was very nice and brought poster boards of potential capital project changes. It was fantastic. So I highly encourage you to go. And Jose, you can put me down for the one in Arlington on the 28th.
Got it. Thank you.
All right, I will. Yeah, I will. I guess I can circulate like a doodle if after tonight's meeting, if people want to attend any of those. And just for those who may not have attended a hearing before, we start out at 5 o'clock with an open house, which is just sort of a big room with poster boards on easels where you can do Q&A, and that would be the time at which y'all can sort of circulate and talk to folks. And that'll last until sort of we have answered everybody's questions, depending on how long that goes. At 6 o'clock, we'll move into a formal hearing where they'll give a brief presentation, and and then we'll listen to people speak. And then that goes until we've gotten through our entire list of speakers. So But as Brian said, you definitely meet a lot of members of the community who are very passionate about transit and keeping the transit. And also, just to let everyone know, as Regina said, the budget isn't even though the general manager will be putting forward a revised budget tomorrow, that reflects, excuse me, that reflects the additional money promised from DC, Maryland, and Virginia. That money, as of right now, is still a promise. So we are going out, all of our budget materials will reference a budget that doesn't have that money in it. So if you go on our homepage, starting this weekend, or on our budget page, ramada.com/budget, you're going to see a lot of really ugly documents that show what we had proposed to do to close that $750 million gap, right? Like a lot of eliminated bus routes, a lot of other cutbacks. And so that's what we'll be going out to the public with, even though that's sort of been overtaken by events.
Thank you, John. Pat, did you have something to say?
Yeah, that's kind of what we had on Monday, John. We got a budget update, and it was, as we affectionately call it, the doomsday budget, which of course there were updated numbers, but nothing officially was released to us, even though it was intimated. The other thing that our people said, and maybe you can verify this, they said, how many hearings can a person testify at? And really, you're counted, you can testify at all the hearings. But we were told that if you've already testified at one, and there are 25 or 30 or 40 people, let's say, at a hearing, and you want to, even if you're the first person there, you'll be testifying at the end of that group if you want to testify at a second hearing.
Yes, so we're hoping, we want to make sure, I think every comment gets counted. So if you show up, I believe, if you show up to 3 hearings, that'll count as 3 comments. But we do want to give people the opportunity who haven't spoken before.
Right. Mm-hmm.
So yes, if you go to hearing A and speak, and then show up at hearing B, you can of course speak, but you'll be after everybody who hasn't already had the chance.
Right. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And and we also, the hearings are great, but they're also only about 5% of the inputs that we get on the budget. We really try to meet people where they are, or make it convenient to submit comments online, at any time of the day or night.
And that's really been the bulk, I think, in the past, John. You've gotten a lot of comments online.
About 95% come in from people outside of the actual formal public hearings. The formal public hearings are not only are they great, but they're also legally required, so we do them. But yes, so we we'll be able to, hopefully, if not in March, at the RACS March meeting. I don't know if staff will have had the time to digest everything yet, but either in March or April, can give an overview sort of what we heard, to help to help with the RACS recommendations to the board on what to do with the budget.
Yeah, great. Good. Thanks, John.
Okay, thank you, Pat. Thank you, John. Thank you, Jose, Brian. That's really helpful, and that sounds like a great thing. So let's move to outreach member report out. So for anyone new, the outreach member report out portion of our agenda is the time for RAC members to let us know about any observations or information they've heard from riders within their networks that might be indicative of problems or concerns in the system. We can then take that info and develop proposed solutions to present to the board. And it's worked well in the past. Sometimes we have a lot of information during this portion. Sometimes we have nothing. So I put it out to the RAC. Are there any reports from your outreach that you want to bring up? Any issues riders have encountered that we need to address and talk about? Going once, twice. All right. Looks like nothing, which is totally fine. We'll move on to the annual report committee outreach. Lucas, who is the annual report committee chair, is unavailable to attend tonight, but he has been working really hard in gathering information and data. He's getting ready, I think, in a week or two to start drafting the annual report. And I can tell you from, last year when we did that, it was a big deal, a lot of media coverage. The board took it seriously. We still cite to it from last year. So the annual report is a really, I think, an important part of what we do. And I also think it's somewhat required in some ways in our bylaws. So what I'm asking the RAC on behalf of Lucas is if every member can go look at Lucas's email that he recently sent out, click on either the survey that he had or the Google Drive spreadsheet, and just kind of talk to a couple, maybe 2 or 3 writers this week. Ask them their top 3 concerns, any proposed solutions, and add it to the spreadsheet. I know that'll make Lucas's job a lot easier. I can tell you that I added about 3 or 4 over the last few days to the spreadsheet. If everybody else does it, I think Lucas will be in a great position to make the first draft of the report. So, but thank you all to all of you that have already contributed to it, and anyone considering contributing to it. It really is meaningful, and it also is good to just kind of actually talk to writers and then put on paper what they've been saying in a kind of an anonymous way. So thank you for that. Okay, new business. So I have a couple things on here, then I'll ask if anybody else has. Dina, I know, just letting you know that I looked into, I talked to John, the gender equality data or committee that you had raised several months ago. We didn't forget about it. My understanding is that the committee will not be prepared to present information until I think after the budget issue is resolved. This is something, again, I asked John to keep tabs on so that doesn't fall through the cracks. I just wanted to let you know that, we haven't forgotten you or your interest in that committee.
Thanks. Can I just back up? Because my understanding was not that there was a committee, so I just want to make sure we're using the right language. I thought it was staff in the Office of Performance.
Yeah, I messed that up.
That's okay. I just want to make sure, just for sort of everyone's, and it's a gender action plan
That's what it was.
has been
Okay.
discussed in public.
Yes, I just wanted to let you know that we didn't forget you, and we don't intend to. We just want to, just when they're
Appreciate it.
available.
Thank you.
Yes, it is, and it is, the last time I talked with, it's part of our, Your Metro Transformation Office is the sort of responsible group for it, and the last time I talked with them about it, outreach to the advisory committees is part of their timeline. So we'll figure out when to schedule that. I think everybody's just trying to get through budget season, and then we'll have a little bit more breathing room.
Thanks,
Okay.
John.
Yeah,
Thanks.
as a Fed in perpetual budget season, I get it.
I have one thing I was going to bring up, but before that, is there any new business or initiatives that any RAC members want to bring up? Is there anything that RAC members would like to be added to next month's agenda? Anything like that? Open the floor to the RAC.
I don't know if this is necessarily a business item, but tune in tomorrow to committee meetings, right? Safety and operations and finance and capital are tomorrow. So I know there's the slide deck's already posted online, so go ahead and check that out.
Great, thanks, Brian. That is helpful. Okay, so a second item we might want to revisit, John, you're not going to like this, is the idea of RAC social media. So while I think our letters to the elected officials was successful, I don't think we got the amplification that some of us had hoped for. Again, this isn't about disparaging or negativity. The comm staff got busy with other things that popped up. That was when we had the snowstorm, things like that. And the result that we ultimately got from the amplification was a tweet after 5 p.m. on a Friday. We didn't get the expected media advisories or press releases that we expected or anticipated, I guess. So again, while we certainly appreciate the effort and the tweet, and again, on behalf of the RAC, John, please pass along that the RAC is grateful for that. that was good. I think that we could have done a little better promoting our own initiatives instead of relying on the comm staff that has, again, numerous competing priorities. And again, I think with a RAC social media, it can also help with things like outreach and independent writer collection, like Lucas's survey and stuff like that. I think that having something like that could really and widen the pool of writers that we can actually reach out to through outreach. That's not just like solely like a Twitter type thing where we can actually have people connect to the survey and fill something out. So one thing that I was thinking about, again, we can discuss it either today or next month, is I could create a RAC Gmail account, easy. We could start up a Twitter, I guess it's X account, or an Instagram account. I'm old, so I don't know, if Instagram's still a thing. But and we can give administrative control to the RAC vice chairs, and then we can build it out. And the reason why I say we do it this way is then we can put out things like Lucas's annual report survey and educate writers about what we've been doing. But the main thing is, the idea is to have a media plan that's agreed upon by the RAC, so we don't have one individual going rogue or engaging in, this is a big one, counterproductive online arguments, like getting into like a Twitter war, like some random RAC person. I think that's something that's plagued the RAC several years ago in the past. And if you look at the kind of legacy Twitter account, it's kind of, it's not how I would expect the RAC to behave, to be honest, or to engage with writers. So, I think an example that we could do is we could post on Twitter with tags to followers of the old legacy RAC account. The RAC has a new account and has been busy advocating on behalf of writers. Obviously, more articulate than that, but the general gist of it. The RAC has been, number two would be, the RAC has been at the forefront of educating elected officials about the writer perspective during the budget issues, with links to our recommendations page on the site so people can click on it and read our stuff. I think that we would have one to Lucas's survey, talk about how we're collecting for the annual report. They can read the old one. And then also, this is a big one too. We can announce our meetings. I know the comm staff had done that, sometime last year. They announced one of our RAC meetings and it kind of fell off the radar because, again, I think they have so many competing priorities. So this is, I guess, what does the RAC think? Is this something we want to do? I mean, it's easy to create a Gmail account, create a new Twitter account, and then or Instagram or whatever, and then just kind of link back to all the old followers. But Dina, go ahead.
Okay. I love the idea of being active and being relevant and sort of getting out there in front of the general public. I guess my concerns are that it does take a lot of energy, having done this for other small sort of groups. And so I just think we need to really think about how we can do that. Is it sustainable? What's going to be sort of the battle rhythm for keeping it going? Because that's just a concern. Because if you're sort of hot for 2 months and then disappear, that's a big disappointment for anybody who actually pays attention.
Very good points. Thank you. Brian.
Yeah, it feels like this conversation, it's one that we revisit often because it is important that we maximize our outreach, especially if other channels aren't the best avenues or don't have the bandwidth like we may have. Just to echo Dina's statement, I think that sustainability argument is important because I'm sure everything that you said, Mike, was something that previous RAC chairs, 7 years ago, 10 years ago, all probably said the same thing. So I just want to make sure that we have a really solid game plan about, how to effectively manage those accounts, in terms of whose responsibility it is, creating a social media calendar, so to speak, and things of that nature. And that will probably take a little bit while to create that foundation, but just something to consider.
Great. Thank you, Brian. Solomon.
Yeah, kind of going off the sustainability piece, but I almost wonder if that we could. I mean, I think the easiest thing to do instead of trying to start something from scratch is to sort of be, for lack of a better word, like a good parasite on existing like communication channels. So I'm just looking at like Metro's Instagram right now, WMATA's, which has like 31K followers, etc. I mean, that's 31K followers that don't need to follow a new account and that don't even want to follow a new account. But even adding a link to like a survey onto that existing, or kind of using existing channels, I think could be helpful. And maybe we do have a kind of an alternate like account that we don't use often, but more as set up so that you can like cross post or kind of saying, hey, like you can press this link to submit your information, submit kind of your survey thoughts. Because I think I'm picturing that's our biggest goal, is to get people, not to get people kind of actively following and reposting our like daily content, because that's not really what we would do, but it'd be more for those like, hey, we're looking for this information, we're looking for kind of, we have this annual report coming out, so it would be pretty infrequent. So I feel like we could partner with existing communication channels as opposed to maybe having our own.
Okay, great. That's very good insight. Does anybody else have any comments? So I don't see anybody on that. So why don't we, what do you guys think of this? What does the RAC think of this? Next month, we add to the agenda a discussion where maybe we consider creating a social media committee that can really game plan how we want to do it, whether it's Solomon's kind of idea or whether it's more of more of a social media calendar where we have accounts and we build in things like, whenever, every once a month we're required to submit a report to the board. So then we maybe have a highlight in there, like here's what we recommend this, or whatever. So we kind of have it built in. We have a social media committee that's kind of their thing to plan it out. They're in charge of it. They can game out the sustainability. But maybe it's something we can have a full discussion and potentially a vote in the next month. And if it turns out that it's just not doable for whatever reason, that's fine too. But I think it's worth one more discussion. Brian.
Sorry, I think that's a great idea. I definitely think that we should revisit this conversation next month and have it dedicated to a discussion point. I would, and again, we can discuss this next month, but maybe consider broadening it to not just social media, but just external communications in general.
Nice.
Because I know that there's just some other means, like obviously email and just things of that nature that I'm sure the RAC would be invested in or want to be.
No, that's perfect. Okay, John, if we can add in the note to add this as a point for the next agenda, that would be great.
Sure. And it may be helpful to either, I guess, between now and next month, and this can be part of the discussion next month, or, if there's thought on what people want to see, I guess email. I'm happy to do it, or Mike, if you want to do it, like send thoughts so that we can sort of put everything down on paper to have some points to start from next month.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can do that.
So I guess all I'm saying is I'm asking you all to sort of put on your thinking caps to see what you think like an appropriate level would be, and we can sort of, I think the discussion might be more productive or may get you to a better place if there's sort of something for people to react to, rather than starting fresh in 4 weeks.
Yes, definitely.
And so, and as somebody who is terrible at social media, I welcome your ideas.
No, that's perfect, and I definitely appreciate that. And but again, please do thank the comm staff for what they did do. It was more of a learning experience and kind of seeing things.
And we have some new, our new, I don't know her exact title. I should, but the person that I met with about this is relatively new to is new to Metro. I think she's been here maybe a month or two. And, I'm sure they'd be willing. It could be, depending on where you all end up with what you want to see, if it's a regular cadence of things, that may be something that could be piggybacked on Metro's existing social. I think this was a one-off that they needed to figure out. So, maybe if it's something more regular, that would do it, but we can save that discussion for March.
Okay, yeah, we'll do this for March. I think we beat that one to death. Thank you, everybody, for indulging me to beat that one to death. So does anybody have any parting words, any final business, any observations before we adjourn? I see Dina has your hand up. Are you saying goodbye?
No, I hand up.
Okay.
Sorry, guys. We'll leave soon enough. So the RAC has, like, we cover a lot of things, right? All across the board of, all angles of the Metro experience. And I realize that the budget has an impact on all of those things. I have a little concern at the amount of time that we've spent on the budget as a full committee. This may be an unpopular opinion. I'm just saying how I feel about it. And so I don't know if this is what happens every year, because I haven't been on the committee for a full year. But I just don't want the other things to go by the wayside, because though they are connected, they still require sort of ongoing, focused thought. What are they? I don't know. I mean, I'm mostly interested in equity, but other people have other angles. So I just wanted to express that I struggle with being diplomatic. I hope that I've come across diplomatically. I don't know. Does it require just sort of a subcommittee who then reports out about the higher level items? And is everyone else really into the budget and it's just me? Don't know.
So I've had the
Hey,
exact
Michael.
same thought. Oh, Pat, go ahead.
Yeah, I can just, having been on the rack longer than everybody, even from the beginning. How many years is that? 15, John, or something like that? This year is very unusual.
17.
17, thank you. Yeah, this year is very unusual. The emphasis on the budget usually is not this devastating on the rest of the agenda, but this year with what you're seeing, closures, half the bus routes being closed, all of that, it's just totally consumed everything. We've had the same issue with AAC, and we are very far behind on our schedule. So I think if we can get funding to get together, and we can get a budget and funding that we can count on a regular basis, which is really something that AAC also wants to see, we can start to get back to the business of looking at other issues. I'm sure RAC can, and I think also AAC is in the same boat. So yeah, you're right. This is unusual, and this is usually we've been at this since what, October, November, 5 months now, straight meetings on just budget. Usually it's a lot easier, and we don't go through as much tension or angst as we are this year.
Dina, your hand up.
Thanks. I just want to reply. Thank you, Pat. Yeah, I understand the devastating impacts of the budgetary shortfall. This is taking that out of consideration, if you can. Obviously, that's a huge concern. I'm not only on the, I'm here because I'm a user and I'm passionate about the system and making it bigger, not smaller. Just wanted to make sure that was clear.
So I appreciate your sentiment. And in fact, I actually agree with you. I've had similar thoughts, and I think kind of to Patrick's point, I've actually found it, like when I was trying to set the agenda and put things together, I've found it really hard. And maybe this is a problem with me. I'm happy to own it. It's difficult to, I guess, address, like certain issues and things that we normally have in the past, because the budget with all these like service cuts on the horizon, it makes it hard to say, what can we fix and talk about that's not going to completely fall apart with this budget. So everything always went back to this devastating future part of it. So I think the idea was, okay, let's try to do what we can to get us back to where, to save the big picture so that we can deal with stuff. That's why, if you recall last month, and again, I don't know if it was obvious, it didn't do the trick. We talked about the budget, but I made a point to add fare increases specifically to the agenda as a separate budget part and focus on the long term. And that was my attempt to kind of do what you're talking about doing, which is for good or bad, or right, if I was right or wrong on that, that was the attempt, and the intent was to get it so that we're actually talking about something beyond the budget. Even though it was kind of a financial thing, it was more of something that affects riders, and the board actually appreciated that separate recommendation that we made. I think they really took to it. I think they actually listened to us on it, so it was effective. But I think at the end of the day, obviously my term as chair is up in April, so I think I have two more months of this. And then somebody else will have the opportunity to do, and I'm sure they will do a much better job. But I think this is where we need members of the RAC to, I definitely need help with, ideas. That's why we have these like member report outs and things like that. So that's why we have things like the annual report, so that we can identify issues and items, so that when RAC members want to bring something up, bring it up. I would love to talk about something other than the budget. So that's just kind of where my thought is. And that's kind of, again, not trying to defend anything, or it's more of just a overall statement of, I found it difficult to get away from the budget every time I've tried to get away from the budget.
I hear you. And I don't want to keep going, but to counter, just for any of the things that we talk about, they're going to be made worse by they're still going to exist. They're going to be made worse by the budget. So it doesn't take them off the table. Obviously, it changes the tenor or the urgency of the conversation. And that's really just to urge us to say, yeah, like all those other things. And I don't know if we have a work plan even in our heads or whatever, like all those different issues that we're interested in, they are still worthy of, directly addressing, while at the same time we think about the budget and how, the amount of a shortfall, certainly, and all over the COVID money is, huge, obviously.
Yeah, so actually one thing in my notes that I didn't mention, but John, now that I thought about it, I have one of the ideas for next month's agenda was I wanted to talk about parking fees, and maybe have somebody come in to talk about that, because as I do my outreach, particularly out in the suburbs of Virginia, a lot of people complain about the parking fees, and they have a lot of thoughts about it. This was in our annual report last time. It's probably going to be in this year's based on some of the outreach. So I think we are on the same page. So I think that's because I'm trying to kind of swerve us back into talking about stuff. And again, I don't know if that goes back into budget world, but parking fees was definitely something that I was going to ask John and the kind of the vice chairs of the RAC to add to next month's agenda. So I think we're starting to come out of this to get into things. But Dina, again, this isn't meant to be flippant or kind of like a harsh response. Honest response or honest question is, if you or anybody in the RAC has something you want to talk about, please email me, email the RAC, say, I'd like to put this on the agenda. Again, I would love to talk about things other than budget. We can and if you give us enough leave time, we can get somebody from staff to come and give us a presentation so we can learn about it, and then we can have our own internal discussion. So, but we need to know what people are interested in talking about, what the issues are, what people in your network have. It's not just for you, Dina, it's for everybody, including myself. John. Pat, go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say, in the past, we've gone through the 8K series as far as rail cars are concerned. Michael, I know you started off having Jordan, what's Jordan's last name?
Holt.
Holt. Yes, giving us the quarterly statistics, which I thought did a great job of giving us a good overview of that. And I think that's something that I also adopted from RAC 8K series, and also having Jordan come and giving us that perspective, because it was a great overview of where do we stand, what are the metrics telling us, how are we doing on bus and rail and all of that sort of thing, because the metrics were good. But we've gotten away from that too a little bit because this has just been all consuming.
Yeah, because where I ultimately want the RAC to be, and this is kind of my intent at the beginning, is to get us where we're not just having these presentations and then nothing comes out of it. It's just kind of like us learning about stuff, then we move on to learn about something else. But I do want the RAC, I think the way for the RAC to be relevant is to handle or to learn about informed deliberation is what the bylaws call it. Learn about something through staff presentations, and then we actually talk about it internally and then come up with recommendations. That was like our fare increase discussion last month was a perfect example. You know, wayfinding might be another one we can do as that moves forward. But these are things, that's where I want to get us to. We're always making recommendations and citing to issues. So that's where I want to go. So I think, Dina, I think we're all on the same page. I think it's just maybe I was slow to get us to where we need to be. John.
Sure, and if I could just weigh in sort of from a staff perspective, a couple of points, because I agree with you all, and we've all sort of been I can tell you, like in the building here, we've all sort of been focused on the budget. But you know, one, budget aside, right? Metro does, we need to be able to walk and chew gum at the same time, because there's a lot of stuff that we're working on. And I can tell you that, you know, the general manager is still pushing staff to do a lot of different things. And so you're right, you all sort of need to hear about those and, you know, and weigh in with your perspective. I guess what I would offer is that there is sort of a plan of items coming before the board that I can share with you all within the next few days, because I think that the opportunity, right, the opportunity for input and to affect change is not exclusively, but often when there is some kind of change planned, right, that you all can get your perspectives and recommendations and voice in there. So I think wholeheartedly agree that I think we'll all be glad when we can put the budget behind us. And so, you know, I'll try and circulate some ideas of what's, you know, or a preview of sort of what's coming down the pike, and not to restrict the group to that, but to maybe give some food for thought. So that then, you know, we can put other stuff on the agenda.
Okay. Sorry, I don't want to get in everyone. I'm ready to adjourn. Thank you.
Sounds good, John. Thank you so much. Thank you, Dina. That I'm glad you brought that up. That is a I appreciate the honesty, the candor, and I think that's a good point. You know, to improve the RAC. So please don't ever. I know you will never hold back, but it goes to all members of the RAC. Don't hold back. You know, if you have any issues or concerns, you think we can do things better, by all means. I think it's productive and it's helpful in the long run. So I personally have no ego in that. So I'm totally happy to hear about it and to adjust fire or whatever we need to do. On that note, I say that we adjourn. I move that we adjourn. Do I have a second?
Second.
Oh, thank goodness. All right, all in favor of adjourning?
Aye.
Say aye. All right,
Aye.
and all opposed? Oh boy. Okay, great. Thank you, everybody. Have a great night. This is a really productive meeting. I appreciate it.
Good night, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.
Night.
Thank you so much.
Good one.
Bye, everyone.
All right.